This right here is crazy. It's definitely crazy. We got to get into this. So this is an article that is basically giving us the rundown on why the owners are kind of refusing to sign off on some of the things that the WNBA players want. It points out viewpoints like them viewing it as an unstable business up to this point.
That single reaction you just witnessed says everything about how dangerously fragile these negotiations have become. Remember, back in October 2024, the WNBA Players Association officially opted out of the collective bargaining agreement, and ever since, we've been inching closer and closer to what could become a massive, potentially catastrophic lockout. But here's the part almost nobody is talking about. The piece of the puzzle missing from nearly every headline and every debate. We're about to step inside the owner's real mindset. Not speculation, not anonymous whispers. The actual hard-nosed business logic driving their refusal to bend on revenue sharing. And trust me, once you see the numbers they're looking at and the risks they're calculating behind closed doors, this entire standoff starts to look very different. From their side of the table, it suddenly makes a lot.
NBA players have quickly become some of the most recognizable female athletes in the world, with ballooning ticket sales and record-breaking viewership over the past 2 seasons. As a result, league revenues have soared. But unlike their male counterparts in the National Basketball Association, who are guaranteed 50% of the NBA's basketball-related income, WNBA players are not guaranteed a percentage of such income, which includes things like media deals, merchandise, ticket sales, concessions, so the players haven't shared in the league's flood of new.
Let's set the foundation, because the numbers here are nothing short of jaw-drop. Right now, WNBA players earn a stunningly low 7% of league revenue. Let me repeat that, 7%. Meanwhile, NBA players are guaranteed a full 50% of all basketball-related income. That massive gulf is exactly what WNBA players are trying to close. And it's also where this entire battle becomes far more complicated than most people realize. For months, major media outlets have covered these negotiations by parroting the same line. The WNBA isn't profitable, but almost none of them have produced a single piece of concrete financial documentation to prove. NBC Sports called the league an unstable business. Bleacher Report wrote, "The league isn't profitable yet." Sports Illustrated echoed the same sentiment, yet not one of these claims was backed by verifiable data. Then The Athletic pushed things even further, citing unnamed sources who insisted the league and its teams haven't been profitable at any point in the WNBA's entire existence. That would mean 29 straight years of losses, an absolutely staggering number, if it's actually true.
And the league has been careening toward a lockout as negotiations soured, with revenue sharing being the largest sticking point. Despite the massive amount of money coming into the WNBA, the league, which is majority owned by NBA owners, wants to keep their revenue sharing structure the same, guaranteeing far more profit for owners and investors than for the players who actually play the game. And too many news reports have catered to owners' interests when reporting on the negotiations between the players.
Now let's talk about the one article, yes, the one that everyone keeps pointing to. In October 2024, just before the CBA opt-out deadline, the New York Post released a so-called bombshell claiming the WNBA was headed for a massive $40 million loss that season. And the source for this huge number? Not financial reports, not verified documents, not multiple league insiders, just one anonymous NBA executive who claimed, "The WNBA owes the NBA so much we won't see any windfall for years." That single comment, one anonymous quote, has somehow become the entire foundation of the WNBA is unprofitable narrative dominating these tense negotiations. But pay attention to the timing. This story drops right before the players' opt-out deadline, the exact moment when both sides are fighting to shape public perception and gain leverage. And it's coming from an unnamed NBA executive who clearly has a strong financial incentive to keep player costs as low as possible.
Now, we've heard over and over and over again how much money these owners lose every year. Oh, we finished in the red, we're in the red, we're in the red, we're in the red. Even with the soar of Caitlin Clark, they claim to have finished in the red. They had to get everybody private jets because everybody was tripping that Caitlin Clark had them. Everybody, so that's another $50 million spent on PJs for everybody. And that.
All right, let's dig deeper, because this entire narrative becomes not just confusing, but honestly insulting to the players when you look at the full picture. The WNBA just finished the most successful, most watched, most talked about season in its 28-year history. Caitlin Clark's arrival didn't just boost interest, she detonated it. driving record-shattering viewership, sold-out arenas, and unprecedented demand across the league. And here's where things get even wilder. Multiple expansion teams are now paying a staggering $250 million each just for the right to join this supposedly unprofitable league. Ownership groups in Portland, Toronto, and San Francisco are writing quarter-billion-dollar checks to buy into a business the media claims is losing $40 million a year. So you have to ask the obvious question. Why would billionaires line up to invest $250 million into a league that reportedly bleeds money? That math doesn't track. Something doesn't fit. Either some of the most successful investors in the world have suddenly forgotten how business works, or the financial reality is far more complex than the simplistic headline. The league loses money every...
Jump in to throw in $250 million to get their team and all of this stuff. But hey, and then it shows here WNBA will lose $40 million this season and its NBA investors are growing impatient. That was an article in the New York Post. And it says when numbers regarding the league's profitability are cited in coverage of the current negotiations, the source is usually an article from the New York Post. Shortly before the deadline to opt out of the CBA in October 2024, prime time for each side try to control the narrative. The Post, Josh Cosman and Brian Lewis reported the WNBA will be...
Let's zero in on a critical factor the team owners are obsessing over, a number that, frankly, terrified them. During the 2024 season, when Caitlin Clark got injured, the WNBA's television viewership plummeted by 55%. Let that sink in. More than half of the entire audience disappeared the moment she couldn't play. This wasn't a slow decline. This was an instantaneous, catastrophic drop, directly tied to the presence, or absence, of a single player. Now, put yourself in an owner's shoes for a second. The players are sitting at the table, demanding a brand new revenue-sharing model that guarantees them a massive slice of all league income. Meanwhile, you just watched your league's audience get cut in half overnight because your biggest star got hurt. What if the injury is worse next season? What if she's out for months? You'd be obligated to pay a huge percentage of revenue that could vanish entirely, all hinging on the health of one individual. From the owner's perspective, that's not a stable foundation for a 50-50 revenue split. It's a massive, terrifying risk. One NBA owners don't face because their league's popularity is spread across dozens of stars and long-established, multi-generational friends.
Of the viewership drop when Caitlin Clark got hurt. 55% of the viewership tanked when Caitlin Clark was injured. Got to take that into consideration. I'm sure the owners are taking that into consideration. Like, hey, what if something happened and this girl gets hurt again? We lose more than half of the viewership again? I'm sure.
All right, with all that risk in mind, let's break down what the league is actually offering the players, because this is where the owners genuinely think they're being generous. The WNBA has put a proposal on the table that would triple player salaries while maintaining a conditional revenue-sharing arrangement. On paper, that sounds incredible. Who wouldn't want to triple their pay? But, of course, there's a catch. That revenue-sharing only activates if very specific growth targets are met. And here's the kicker. According to the league itself, those benchmarks have never once been reached in the history of the league. Sure, the 2020 COVID shutdown made hitting them impossible. But even in normal years, the league has consistently structured these targets to be extremely difficult, if not outright impossible, to achieve. And the final, most frustrating piece? Even if, by some miracle, the targets are met, the players only get to share in the overage, the money earned above the benchmark. And even then, they receive only a tiny fraction of that overage. So when the league tells the public that revenue sharing is part of the offer, they are technically telling the truth. But it's a version of revenue sharing that has been designed from day one to rarely, if ever, pay out a single dollar to the player.
This is them questioning the owner's stance and why they have not been transparent with documentation for the WNBPA showing the losses and all of that stuff. But it's also showing their viewpoint on why they are hesitant to commit to whatever this revenue sharing thing is. Like, the players getting 50% of the revenue sharing is not going to happen. You can forget about that. They can forget about that. That's not going to happen.
This is exactly where the players' skepticism becomes not just understandable, but completely justified. As the original article wisely points out, reporters covering this story need to read these proposals carefully and critically. It's a huge difference between straightforward revenue sharing, where players receive a fixed, agreed-upon percentage of all league revenue, just like NBA players, and the convoluted formula the WNBA owners are presenting. On paper, they can claim they're offering revenue sharing, but in reality, the actual payout is structured to be minimal, if not entirely non-existent. the owners are counting on the fact that most fans and media won't dig into the fine print. Publicly, they can say, "We offered to triple salaries and include revenue sharing," which sounds incredibly generous at first glance. When you examine the deal closely, the revenue sharing portion may never actually materialize. Even with tripled salaries, players would still earn only 7 to 10% of total league revenue. A far cry from the 50% their male counterparts receive in the NBA. The gap is staggering, and the deal is structured in a way that keeps it firmly in the owner's favor.
It says when the league says revenue sharing is part of its offer to the players in current negotiations, reporters ought to read that with skepticism. Does it mean players get a share of all revenue, sometimes referred as a clean sharing like the men, or does it mean there's a complicated formula that allows the league to say they're sharing when in fact the women will get peanuts? So, listen, man, this lockout, I mean, we're getting all viewpoints, and this is just kind of showing kind of where the owners stand in all of this and why they are not looking to give the players what they want. Get down.
So, here's where we ultimately land after unpacking this incredibly complex negotiation. From the owner's perspective, they're staring at what they consider a fundamentally unstable business model. Viewership is dangerously concentrated around just one or two star players, and they constantly point to decades of reported financial losses, even if those reports lack any transparent documentation to back them up. At the same time, they see expansion teams paying massive 9-figure fees, a clear signal that the league does have significant underlying value. Yet they're also forced to confront the harsh reality that the NBA has been subsidizing WNBA operations for years. The paradox: the league is both incredibly valuable and, in the owner's eyes, risky.